We are live here in Paris for Paris Blockchain Week at the Sandbox Artverse Gallery. I'm here with Joanna Rindell, Head of Legal at Trilitech. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to be here in this beautiful space, like very, very cool. And yeah, it's been a fantastic 2 days so far. So looking forward to the last day. And then, yeah, it's great.
Tell me a little bit about your entry into tech from a legal standpoint.
I've been in tech for or working as a tech lawyer for almost 10 years. And yeah, my first job I'm from Finland originally. So I worked at a company called WonderDog, and we were, or it is still a software and development agency. And back then when I started as their first, legal hire, the company was like still, building out the structures and so on. So help them build out basically, the organizational structures, legal structures, how putting all of that in place, and also working really closely with developers and designers, which was super useful because as a tech lawyer, it is really, really important that you really also understand the processes in the background, like, all of the components that need to go into a functioning product, and to take that all into consideration also when you build out contracts and stuff. So that was, super useful and a good segue into that. And then after that, now since 2021, I've been in blockchain.
Okay, and so how'd you get into Trilitech?
My first job was actually at Parity Technologies. And then from there, I moved on to work for a couple of NFT projects, World of Women also being one of them. And then actually as World of Women joined the Tezos ecosystem, I also joined Trilitech, like together with them, I would say, and so that's how I got into it.
I'm just curious, what was the legal landscape or the different questions that came up during the NFT craze in 2021 when you first got into it?
Back then it was and still is, I would say, to a certain degree, but a lot of how can you, I mean, it did fundamentally start from let's empower also artists to have a way to get royalties and so on, more so I suppose for themselves to a certain degree. And we eliminate the middleman, which is kind of, I mean, the general ethos in crypto. But a lot of questions concern like IP rights, of course, like what does it mean, the type of licenses. I worked a lot with or worked a lot around and with questions such as how do you license and under which type of licenses do you license your artwork. And so you had back then, I don't know if you remember, but like Moonbirds, changing their licenses to the CC era, and that, being a whole discussion, and also how permissive, how much do you give away. So for example, World of Women has a very permissive license in that we actually, if you buy an NFT, a World of Women NFT, you do get the rights to the underlying art completely. So we don't keep any of the rights actually to the art, and then you can commercialize it how you see fit. So it's a very permissive license. Yeah.
Well, I mean, as you're on that, I'm just curious, what do you think the future of NFTs is going to be?
I think that the technology is definitely going to be used. I'm also really curious as to what that big next sort of thing is that the technology will be used for, because of course I definitely believe still that like art is going to have a place in the blockchain space, but whether or not we will see like very expensive NFTs like in the future, I don't know. But I'm more so thinking about like, but the technology still is good and useful, and so whether or not, probably like ticketing. I still believe like ticketing, although people have been saying that for years, but still I think ticketing is a good example. And also I would be still curious and kind of hoping to see more use cases of people using it to verify, the heritage of something, like, I don't know, everything from, I suppose, in the supply chain. I think if you could use it for that, to see like where products have come from and so on, that would be cool. I do also think that for real world assets, NFT technology can have a space so that you tokenize, I don't know, shares in a house, for example, or like, parts of a building, for example, and then share it, sell it as NFTs.
You've had a handful of really interesting conversations since you've gotten here, I presume.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the conversation has been at the roundtables that you've been sitting at and contributing to since you've gotten here?
So very, very interesting discussions indeed that I've had the privilege of being part of for the last, specifically yesterday. There was a compliance coffee hosted by European Crypto Initiative, IODS, yesterday, for example, and where the conversation was really largely around, MiCA going forward, MiCA together with DORA. How do you build out like also compliant products going forward? What is sort of future requirements as well on builders in that sense? Because the more regulation that's coming out, I mean, the more compliance restrictions are there to consider. But I would say that that in general as well. And then in the afternoon yesterday, I attended a roundtable as well, and I would say throughout the whole day, the common theme is, okay, so now we have regulation in place in Europe. We're seeing that there is a more, liberal approach to crypto in the US. Then we're also seeing that the UK is, now considering what type of regulation to actually put in place. And sort of the common theme is that people are now realizing that, okay, like the struggles with also following the MiCA regulation, for example, it is expensive if you really want to be compliant, to put everything in place. And how do you then now moving forward, how do you build like processes, I suppose, that really support the builders to still stay compliant, but also not to overcomplicate things. And also in general, I suppose, just with regards to the US, I think there isn't like legal, there are just a shift in approach in how they talk about crypto in a more positive way. And that somehow, has sort of shifted everyone's now approach to going into to the US and doing business there, which of course is good. In that sense, it's good that you have potentially a more positive landscape, but also the reality is that there is no legal framework still in the US being papered down. So you have a positive attitude towards it, but how much you are actually going to like get put into writing in the US is still very unsure. So so in that sense, I mean, it's still like EU in that sense, or the European Union with the MiCA regulation is still ahead, I would say, a little bit of that, because at least we have like a proper regulation, on paper. This is what we agreed on. This is what we're going to follow, because in the US right now, you just have a positive sentiment. But you don't really have anything concrete. So what happens in the next, I don't know, 6 months, 4 years, I mean, it can just shift.
Wow.
So today, you have a positive attitude, but what happens tomorrow, it's, without anything concretely papered down, it's hard.
So regulation, you're saying, is important, ultimately.
Yes, for sure. Just to give, certainty, because again, I suppose with my example of the US is that it's still easier at the end of the day to plan for long term. I mean, if you're a builder, you want to be having certainty so that when you build your products, you know that you're building it for the future. If you have a regulation, at least you have something papered down that you can then say, look, these were the rules and this is what we're following. If you have, until you have just positive sentiment, it's still not anything as concrete as a regulation.
Interesting. It's interesting to hear a legal person's perspective, because all these founders that I'm speaking to are saying, like, in the EU you have to jump through all these hoops, which is probably the case, but they're all talking about how the US is open now. But in reality, that's not enough, right? You need.
I mean, I suppose that's the interesting thing, right? Because everyone is like, because you have that positive, attitude towards it, and the US is open. But I suppose I would caution in general to just say, well, until you really have proper regulation in place, it might also shift the attitude towards crypto from one day to the next.
Interesting. So are there any interesting projects that you've come across from a legal perspective since you've been here in Paris?
I think for the last couple of days, I wasn't so familiar with projects like Notabene and VerifyVASP and so on. I, of course, knew that they exist, but just to meet them and their founders, I had the privilege of meeting both founders, from both the Notabene founder and the VerifyVASP founder, and other also, kind of infrastructure projects like that. I think what they're doing, for example, VerifyVASP, focusing on the transfer of fund regulation and like figuring out solutions to how to help projects be, or not projects, maybe so much as CASPs, like how they are defined in the MiCA regulation, for example, so crypto asset service providers, like how they're really like building out solutions that help these projects and implement, like build out also compliance structures, going forward, and how do you verify, wallet transactions and so on in a very compliant way. Notabene doing a sort of swift solution for crypto payments as well. They are really really important things that these projects are building out, because good infrastructure is still so important when you're building out your tools, and just to have that available. And it's maybe not always the what people first think about when it's like, if you talk about I don't know, interesting projects. Maybe just interesting for me, I think they're very interesting, but they're still so necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your thoughts kind of on like diversity in Web3. I know you've been involved with World of Women, and I feel like that's something that's big for you.
So in general, since I started in tech, I've always been a big advocate for like diversity and inclusion, women in tech. Even before like I started my Web3 career, I was very involved in all sorts of initiatives to educate women more in tech, STEM initiatives and so on. In Web3, also a very important topic. I think still education is so important. I'm very excited now because in the future you will have more women having more wealth. So with generation shifts and so on, you will see that. And if we then also educate women even more so in aspect like in finance basically, and investing their money and supporting other women, and how they can invest directly in women-led projects if they want, and all these kind of things. So that I think is very important, and something that I feel very strongly about, that this is very much needed, or will be needed even more so in the future, to bring women together, introduce them more so even to each other, help them invest in other women-led projects, and also just educate them with regards to money and finance effectively.
Amazing. Have you seen a shift in Web3 at all happening over the last couple of years?
I do think I see more women coming in all the time.
Nice.
And also having that there are more women in different type of roles. Because I do feel that in the beginning especially it was quite stereotypically, you could find women in quite stereotypical roles.
Right.
And now you're getting more women developers as well and so on, which is in product development and so on, which is very much needed, because also if you don't have women in, for example, product development, research also shows that you will have, products developed for or more limited, maybe targeted audience. And if you then have women also working on product development, they might look the products a little bit different. So.
Okay, amazing. I guess my last question is just guide us through your role at Trilitech right now.
Right now, wow, it's a very, it's definitely a very diverse role that I have. Super interesting. I mean, we're definitely striving also to be on the cutting edge of many, like building out many new things, such as we have a project currently running on the Tesos blockchain that allows people to directly invest into physical uranium through like having tokenized that asset, and which is huge, because that also gives retail investors access to something that they didn't have access to directly before. So that's just one of the things that we do. But I mean, we also do, so much more, and building out the tech all the time to be even faster, even better, more secure. So that is like, these are projects I support a lot on, but then of course also just day-to-day in-house legal counsel jobs, which like it's a broad variety between employment law to privacy to
Okay.
blockchain,
Okay, I'm sure it sounds like a lot.
but it's great. Otherwise, it would be boring.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, Joanna, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It's been so nice speaking to you.
Yes, thanks for your time.
Hey, what's up?
This is
But
Zach.
it's not something Gen Z is afraid of.
If you want to survive, you got to build a
How
hive.
do you know we do not understand that we do not understand?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Rebecca's Gen Z Media House.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.